So we're back with the Leo Kanan podcast, and I wanted to dive into the UN vote that was recently conducted, where Ghana introduced a resolution to recognize the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, as the gravest crime against humanity. I thought the voting turnout was very interesting, and I'm really interested in what are like the spiritual ramifications for these votes, because everything is spiritual. And aside from, the political arena on these, like what are some ramifications that people aren't thinking of? So the voting turnout was 123 in favor. And the favorable votes were Ghana, African Union, CARICOM, which are the Caribbean countries, Russia, China, and then most of the developing countries. There were quite a few that abstained from voting, meaning they didn't vote at all, like 52 to 53, and this was the EU, all of the European countries, the UK, Canada, Australia, Japan, and then some other allies. But the three notables that voted no were the United States, Israel, and Argentina. So I kind of wanted to get, what is your take spiritually for voting no on such a horrific event in human history, and then, abstaining, and then yes.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy that the United States would vote the way it did, because the United States benefited mostly from the transatlantic slave trade.
Yeah.
And so that part in itself is it's crazy. But as we, as a global society, as individual societies that connect to a global organism that is a society, you have to remember that we are always that organism that makes us a global society. And then we also exist socially in our country, the UK, and different places. And I break it down that way because you want to break it down even a little further to the individual, the reason for spirituality, the reason for religious processes, etc. And, whether or not it always functions the way it should, the end result of it is to ignite self-accountability and actualization or self-awareness. Now, different religions take a different approach to that process, and then some require less effort on the participant or congregant or whatever you want to call them. And when you get closer to spiritual sciences like, Buddhism and Hinduism and African spirituality, they're more of a science than what a lot of belief systems are that's based on doctrine.
Like Judeo-Christian kind of.
Yeah, they kind of get further away from the natural science of what a spiritual process would be. Now, you can get away with that when you're trying to govern, different size demographics of people, whether it's 1 billion Christians or, 900,000 Baptists, I don't know. But when it's a spiritual process, countries have to hold themselves spiritually accountable. They don't get to retreat into religious doctrine, okay, and dogma.
I have a quick question about that. So you have a lot of countries, like especially in the Middle East, that are, they have their state religion. They're Muslim states, or, Israel is a Jewish state. But we have the United States that is supposed to be secular. We don't have a state sanctioned religion. How does that play into, holding yourself accountable or holding your spirituality?
Well, let me go back and finish your first question, because that question kind of takes me off a different, me on a different angle. But so let me finish that first question first, which is the purpose of a vote like this, and how not only is America and Israel and Argentina, they are not holding themselves spiritually accountable.
Yeah.
And they know it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that they don't know that's what they're doing. What they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For example, America's response is based on the premise that, it was not illegal at the time.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's break down how they know that is a poor excuse and it's actually a lie on the face of it.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It was illegal at the time. Human trafficking is always what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But let's say specifically why it was illegal at that time. Each one of these countries didn't decide to go just over the countryside and make their own countrymen slaves.
Yeah.
Okay. If it wasn't illegal at the time, the United States would have they would have taken Native Americans and made them slaves.
Yeah.
There would have been no need to cross an ocean to go get slaves. Why not just make the Native American slave? And they didn't do that because they were told by the Catholic Church to not do that. Mm-hmm. And the reason why they were told by the Catholic Church to not do that is because the Catholic Church understanding of spiritual laws. Mm-hmm. And in this particular case is if you take a people that's native to that soil and if those people fight back, that land will fight with those people. Mm-hmm. The land itself, the energy, the spirit of that place will fight with those people.
Right.
And you will ultimately fail.
Right.
And this is a good example of that is the Vietnam War.
Yeah, even the Revolutionary War.
The Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
If you fight against the people of that land will fight with those people. And so they knew they needed to go to a different place and disconnect the different people and bring them over here and make them slaves. They knew what they were doing was spiritually wrong. Mm-hmm. And to justify it, they decided to say that these people are 3/5 of a man.
Right.
If it wasn't illegal to do that to a human being, there would be no need to retroactively put in that Constitution that it was 3/5 of a man.
Right.
Because that's to justify your crime.
Right.
Now, if these were humans, we wouldn't have done this, obviously.
Yeah.
But the reason why we're doing this is because they're not human. So you know what you're doing is illegal.
Right.
And so to hold to that stance is a form of narcissism. Mm-hmm. There's zero accountability there. Mm-hmm. And let's just say for shits and giggles, it was absolutely illegal. It was absolutely legal. Mm-hmm. And they did nothing wrong at that time. Mm-hmm. That still does not negate you from holding yourself accountable because you are living in a different time.
Right.
If that's not the case, then we wouldn't have gone through this Me Too movement.
Right.
That's the exact same principle there.
Yeah, you were just getting away with it.
You were just
back then.
Right. You were just getting away with it back then, and it's not okay now, which means it's not okay back then, which means we get to hold them accountable.
Right.
Now, what the UN is doing that on a global scale. Mm-hmm. And what the United States is deciding to do is say, we're not holding ourselves accountable. Mm-hmm. So imagine through this whole process, Bill Cosby decided to say, you know what, that was 40 years ago. No, I'm not going to court. I'm not getting a defense attorney. I'm not doing any of it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to not participate in that process. I'm not apologizing because what I did back then, it was okay to do
it. That's you can't even, it's hard to contemplate.
It's hard to contemplate that, but that's what the United States is doing.
Yeah.
On a much grander scale.
Can I ask a question about some of the other reasoning? Israel and Argentina are using the wording as an objection. So Israel obviously has their, bias on crimes against humanity with the Holocaust. It was a horrific event, but it was a short period of time it occurred. The slave trade was, 400 years. But they're saying that calling it the gravest crime against humanity sets up like a ranking system for crimes against humanity, and they don't want to do that.
And this was Israel and Argentina's.
Yeah.
Listen, that's BS.
Mm-hmm.
There's this incident way back in the 80s with Margaret Thatcher. They had finally bagged her into a corner. I can't remember what document it was that they needed the UK to sign the prime minister.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Margaret Thatcher did, she sent them back 20 times.
Oh yeah, they kind of touch on that in The Crown.
Over the language of it.
Yeah, she needed it worded just precise.
Right. It had to be worded. That's what this is.
Yeah.
And so what they're basically saying is we don't want to get into a contest of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And, we don't give a shit about black people.
Yeah.
I mean, let's call it what it is.
Yeah. It's disappointing.
We don't give a shit about black people. And it's not that we don't give a shit about black people because we don't give a shit about black people. That's not it. That's what we want you to believe.
Mm-hmm.
We don't give a shit about black people because we want the common people to think we don't give a shit about black people, and we don't want them to understand the spiritual power of black people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that we use to our advantage, but we do not want them to be aware of the spiritual power they possess.
You don't want them to have like actualization.
Yeah, you don't want them to have actualization. And so that is what is the agreed upon thing that we all need to try and stop is from black people to get to self-actualization.
So does that tie into all the countries that just didn't vote, that abstained?
Yeah.
It's just complacency?
Well, it's what you call, where I come from, you would call that a bitch ass move.
Yeah.
That's what that is. Like, stand your ass up and get counted.
Yeah.
Like, come on, don't do a bitch move and say, no, we're not going to stand up and be counted. Pick a side.
Right. They listed their the generalization of their concerns is over legal liabilities for the vote.
Yeah,
but it still feels the same.
It feels the same, but I can understand the financial accountability aspect that this could lead to. Mm-hmm. And so, as different nations, we're not ready to swallow that pill yet.
Right.
But we're not going to just negate the validity of this particular vote and vote against it.
Yeah.
But we can't put both feet in the water just yet. And so, I'm talking shit when I say it's bitch ass move. To a degree, it is, but there are
things that have to be set up to really take care of it appropriately.
Right. So, but the United States and Israel, this is a different animal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It should be apparent, who is the villain on the world stage at this point.
And that's wild too when you say that, because world powers are voting for it. Russia and China, who, being in the U.S., we consider our quote unquote enemies, but what do we even understand about their countries where everything we get is so filtered and propagandized, to shape our beliefs.
Yeah. So, and it all boils down to a spiritual process that's not just acting on the nations, but a spiritual process that's acting on the people. Because at the end of the day, the American people should be really up in arms that the United States voted that way.
Right.
And when I say the American people, I mean white people.
Yeah.
They should be very upset. Like, hey, that's not how we feel about that.
Yeah.
We feel that that is one of the greatest crimes against humanity. And the United States, there's an accountability aspect to the United States government that will only hold themselves accountable to white people. And so, and they're very adept, and because they're made of white people, they're very adept at manipulating each other.
Oh, yeah.
They just manipulate each other back and forth, and nobody gets anything done. And it's this silent, agreed upon process that says we're just going to act like that people right there that's right next to us, that they're invisible. And we'll help you as a citizenry pretend that those people are invisible, because we're going to act like they're invisible too, and then you get to act like they're invisible. And that people being black people. And then the only time black people come into vision of white people is when the behavior is so base and annoying that you know it's in the news for these negative things that black people do, or the effect of having the black experience is so profound that it catapults you into stardom based on creativity or athleticism.
Yeah.
And part of how that happens is the black experience.
Right.
And so you can't deny the visibility of those two extremes.
Yeah.
But everybody else in black culture that's anywhere in the middle, they're invisible to us.
Right.
And so what that does is that gives you the ability to not hold yourself accountable for these past deeds.
Right.
Because this same citizenry that is upholding the Me Too movement, they're also ignoring the fact that their government just voted this way.
Right.
You follow me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so the Me Too movement is okay over here. You must be, men must be accountable for this, that, and that, whatever, how far back that may go. Fair enough. But then that should also be extended to the government, who's voting to say that the transatlantic slave trade was not a crime. So we're not going to vote on it.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How does that same court system, how is it trying Bill Cosby? How is it calling Bill Cosby to account for his past actions? Because that shouldn't be existing. Or fucking Harvey Weinstein, for that matter, whatever kind of troll he is. Why is he being held accountable for these previous actions, but your government is not holding itself accountable?
That's a great question.
You see, and so, but in order to get to a point where we're asking these kind of questions, collectively, the society has to go through a spiritual process. It can't be these legitimate spiritual awakenings for just a few people, and then that is counterbalanced by so many psyops that are moving through American culture. All these, the moon landing, flat Earth. There's so many psyops now that.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like too, just how we teach in schools, there have been studies on this, how like since we've digitized the education system, that this generation that's going through now is actually their IQ scores are lower than the previous generation, the millennials, and that's never happened. So, we have all of this that's, dumbing things down. So you don't even know what the government's voting on. Like, you have to really go and search for, even just within our own government, like, oh, they're voting on this measure, they're voting on this measure. And you don't even know what's happening because you're locked into your screen at school, and then you come home and you're on your tablet, and these are kids, or you're on the TV. Like, there's so many distractions, and then adults have the same distractions and even more so, with life. So like getting people to pay attention to government and why the government's not holding itself accountable is another hurdle.
That's a big one. Are we going to go into a part 2? Because if we go into a part 2, we can cut it off right here. And then, okay, get us at part 2.